Okay, we are going to begin. Welcome to the Policy Studies Organization, and the name of this panel is The Future of Developed Democracies in the Natural Environment, the Role of Public Interest Technologies, such as AI, fusion, and space, in theory, policy, practices, and politics. We have 3 speakers today. And if you have any questions, you can type them in chat. We are going to address them after the presentation. And our first speaker is John Draper. I'm going to give the floor to John, and the other speakers can go on mute. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to try and share the screen now. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
All right, good. So good morning. I'll be speaking on fusion as a quintuple helix-driven public interest technology and the concept of a global commission to accelerate fusion energy, which is quite topical. It's been mentioned at the COP conferences for the past 2 or 3 years. And it's potentially an energy that could be supplying substantial part, or at least a significant part, of the world's energy supplies by 2100, and hopefully earlier. So let's see. Okay, so some background is that this is born out of the quintuple helix model of innovation, which comes from the branch of economics called innovation economics, which specializes in innovation, and fusion certainly is an innovation. There's various spheres involved, 5 of them in total, 3 traditional ones of academia, industry, and government, added to by civil society and the media, and after that, the environment. Quite complex models of the quintuple helix have been developed and applied for sustainable development. And the quintuple helix model can account for education systems, economic systems, media and the culture, the knowledge creation system that comes out of the public sector, the political system as well as, and the natural environment. Now we move on to public interest technology. Public interest technology is an approach to the use of technology to promote the development and realization of socially responsible solutions to the challenges of technology-driven world. It's people-centered. It's emerged only recently in the last 4 years or so, largely out of the public interest technology university network sponsored and promoted by New America, but it has much older roots in the general concept of the res publica, the public, and public interest law and public interest journalism, promoting really the public, sometimes against government or against public sector in the United States. We look at the basic mechanism of the public interest technology. It's people-centered problem solving using an iterative feedback loop consisting of, well, amongst other things, delivery and data. Within the United States, it comes out of national, state, or local levels. It's seen in those levels of government. And some examples might be the World Wide Web, how secondhand mobile phones are used, especially using Android, health apps, especially for reaching out to communities in developing countries through for vaccinations. Also, government gateways, where you get your taxes done, where you can apply for benefits. These are forms of public interest technology. Within energy, community solar could be a form of public interest technology. Like I said, it has origins in law, journalism, but also with the technology co-design, responsible innovation, which is quite big in Europe, and the general field of STS, as well as VDD.
John,
values-driven design. Yes.
you are being interrupted at some points. I'm not sure if two of the other speakers have to be on mute, otherwise John kind of echoes and it's not very clear sound.
Okay, so the other people need to mute, right? Can global fusion be PIT? Like I said, PIT is usually local, state, or national, but there is no real reason why, in principle, it can't be global. All you need is a subjective problem, and to treat that problem as an engineer would, as Eric Stribling of the Interplanetary Initiative at Arizona State University did in this diagram. So it's the treatment of subjective problems in a way that would be understandable to engineers and technologists. So driven by measuring instruments, empirical data, research, data collection, and then the correlation of that data. Now, is fusion a subjective problem in that way? And I would argue fusion globalization is a subjective problem. I'm pretty sure Alaios would agree with that as well. Fusion energy breakthrough may be a more objective problem, but then how that is commercialized is more of a subjective problem. And at the moment, fusion energy will play no significant role in global energy supply by 2050, risks playing no significant role in global energy supply by 2100. There have been the measuring instruments that could help us understand how to accelerate fusion, and these have been developed already by ARPA-E and Eurofusion, who've created various models of how accelerated advanced fusion could be developed, so that by 2100 fusion could play a significant role. The acceleration then is a subjective problem, and it's a massive oversimplification to say that, but we have, that is the team I work for, which is supervised by Professor Elias Karianis, has started to break down the different subtypes of problems, of the subjective problems that fusion faces. And you can see some of them here. Fusion is a global technological energy pathfinder, the new Cold War that has broken out between Russia and Europe and the United States, the role of China, the status of public sector fusion versus the status of private sector fusion, and so on. And I'm just trying to go through that. Right, so this is an example of one of those subjective problems that we've analyzed, which is the relationship with the global South. As we've heard today, the Green Climate Fund is finally getting the sort of money that it needs, 100 billion per year, dollars, I think that is, per year, to actually address how to transfer technology to the third world, or global South, as it's usually called these days. So the role of entrepreneurs, the role of organizations like OPEC, which could support the development of fusion or hinder the development of fusion, and so on. So one of the solutions we are suggesting is a global commission. Global commissions have been used for the eradication of polio, HIV, in the area of health, and also more recently by the International Energy Agency for energy. And you can read more about that in our publications. But a global commission would have subjects of discourse, subjective information, stakeholders, and collective information, and would have argumentation occurring throughout it. It would be a complex socio-technical design. And another way to look at it would be in terms of, as you can see in this diagram, laws, regulations, policies, guidelines, and then equity, justice, fairness, dignity, well-being, and welfare. These are the values at the heart of a global commission. values that come from values-driven design, and they're values that are compatible with the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And applying socio-technical design to the Global Commission allows us to look at it in terms of relatively complex and detailed outputs, like what action, what detriment, what goals, what measures and metrics will be required, as well as what policy, process, remedies, responsibilities, rules, and values. And we've identified 5 UN Sustainable Development Goals that can inform the Global Commission. We can look at what subjective information has to be created for a Global Commission to actually work, including where the accountability is, what kind of blame has to be overcome, historical blames, claims, what kind of expectations have to be managed, as well as judgments, what kind of observations there are, and so on. So, to summarize, to understand some of the values involved in fusion research and innovation, such that fusion energy development becomes responsible to the public, we have expanded an original GeoPest analysis, which is political, economic, social, and technological analysis, into a GeoPESTLE one, which adds the legal and the environmental. And we have emphasized values which are already at the core of responsible innovation, governance, and public interest technology. And we have scaled that up using the UN Sustainable Development Goals, such as energy for all, such as peace building, and we aim to use these to guide a global commission. We can therefore then derive principles and models for the Global Commission that will be transparent to all of the membership of the Global Commission, and the membership will have to incorporate both the fusion powerhouses of the North, Global North and West, as well as potential Global South and OPEC, for example, partners who would want to transition away from oil and fossil fuel-based energy to fusion in a managed way where their public sectors are dictating the pace of the transition, rather than, for example, the oil companies. You just take the example of Saudi Arabia. The government of Saudi Arabia will want to dictate the pace of transition to fusion energy. They will not want that to be dictated by the West. They will not want that to be dictated by the Fusion Industry Association or other private sector fusion players. And that kind of mentality is going to have to be accommodated and managed, not just in the Middle East, but in South Africa, South America, and so on. In that way, we can derive principles for membership, goals for the Global Commission, and detailed steering documentation that can be used by technical subcommittees to deliver outputs for a Global Commission that can bring together both the Global North and Global South. Thank you. I think the moderator has disappeared.
I'm in the panel space finally.
No, I did not disappear. I just
Yes.
I think
Sana, sorry.
I think we will address all the questions at the end. So I'm going to give the floor to the next speaker, and who is going?
So let me Karoli will speak next. And I will conclude at the end. I finally managed to join the Zoom space. Go ahead, Karoli. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Karoli Tamás Olajos, and I'm grateful to have your attention in the next 20 minutes. Allocation of attention, which Wenger defines a new constraint in our world after capital, is what determines how far humankind can flourish. However, humankind as a whole allocates far too little attention to opportunities like fusion energy. Therefore, in the 2020s, this decade of action, we need to bring fusion energy close to the people so that full development of fusion technology can guarantee a bright future for humankind by fulfilling an old dream to master an abundant and limitless energy source. Fusion technology, like any other technology, is a product of our own devising. Therefore, fusion technology must serve a social purpose. Now, an interesting thing about social purpose is that it refers to some state in the future. It points in a direction of both functional change and increased meaning. Thus, social purpose gives the enduring reason for being, that is, to create a better world. But the idea of a better world seems utopic when our children will know a world completely different or worse what we know today. Yet because technological progress changes what is possible, fusion technology can bring our children the hope they need. A new set of technological capabilities enables new forms of living that we can design to be qualitatively better. This is why we must look into the future through the lenses of different types of realizable ideas, economic goods, moral values, legal norms, and aesthetic appearances to create plenty, goodness, justice, and beauty for all. Nevertheless, fusion technology alone will not be sufficient to make a difference. If fusion energy is to succeed in a competitive market, then it must disrupt the electricity markets. Yet new technology like fusion is not intrinsically disruptive. The success of its market entry will largely depend on how it will be deployed into the market relative to the business models applied by incumbents. According to Christensen's theory, fusion technology can be disruptive innovation only if a new market is created or low-end customers can be served. Yet, deuterium-tritium fusion at best qualifies as a hybrid and therefore sustaining innovation because it will produce the same electricity with the same thermal power, but at a higher price point as the result of extremely complex operations. This is why fusion technology should be designed and developed with human-centeredness in mind. We need a new and compelling narrative of our future based on an ethical vision of what human beings are and how they should live together. Only people themselves can do that because technology is an instrument for human beings. Yet uncertainties in fusion development will remain with us for a long time, and not addressing uncertainties timely in fusion development may lead to market failure, even if fusion technology were able to meet all performance requirements. Therefore, responses to uncertainties will impact how, and most importantly, when fusion energy can enter the market. As we learned from Christensen, disruption is relative to the business model that includes the customer, the value proposition, the value chain for product delivery, and the means of value capture. Whereas startups can start with a blank sheet of paper in designing their business model, incumbents sometimes must deal with factors that impede change. In this respect, humankind has a unique value proposition. We can use cognition to improve business models involving fusion technology, which is important because business model is also human-centered. Therefore, we must make customers of fusion products, together with their communities, the main co-creator of value. Yet, the inability to answer the question of substitutability of fusion product implies that it is too early to define a market strategy for the fusion enterprise. Because early fusion technology will not be able to compete on cost, and most probably will only be able to perform good enough to create a winning market entry strategy for fusion products. The markets, the competition, the customers, and their needs and wants will need careful consideration. What we can do today, however, is adopting a non-market strategy for fusion R&D, in which politics-led development replaces the current technocracy-led development, while the international arena takes over the current national arena, focusing on adopting a global regulation for the development and deployment of fusion technology. Yet, due to the uncertainties inherent in a nascent technology, the substantive content of regulation cannot be decided today, and fusion's regulation is proposed to be looked at differently. Bringing fusion to the electricity grid is no longer a technical but a political and societal issue, which must be looked at as a wicked problem that requires clumsy solutions. In this vein, following cultural theory, fusion technology calls for a hierarchical top-down regulation, an individualistic preference for competitive processes among approaches, an egalitarian emphasis on open innovation, and a fatalistic belief that together we can do it. The only considerable exception in the international arena, where all four ways of finding a clumsy solution coexist, seems to be the formation of the global climate policy within the framework of the UNFCCC. Thus, bringing fusion energy to the global climate policy dialogue may become an effective way to accelerate fusion R&D. Because, as we have seen, early fusion technology will not be able to compete on cost, and regulation is a precondition for efficient markets, which is claimed to bring down cost. If application of fission's regulation can be spared, regulation can provide incentives to accelerate fusion R&D. By specifying clear requirements early enough that result from the needs of stakeholders, following a global, multi-stakeholder and inclusive review, regulation can contribute to the alignment of fusion technology with the needs of its stakeholders and warrant that fusion technology can move out of the niche. The complexity of fusion technology, being of several orders of magnitude higher than the complexity of fission technology, mandates the international community to consider not only the content of fusion's regulation, but also the governance network that could develop and deploy fusion power plants in a way that would make the most economic sense. In today's world, however, pursuit of economic performance can no longer be the de facto purpose of a governance network. Therefore, we can expect to move away from the finance-driven management model and to bring humanity-centered design and management to the front that have a strong vision and clear purpose to improve people's and their communities' lives exponentially. This type of leadership involves a mission-driven behavior that constructs narrative of fusion technology futures. While a humanity-centered fusion R&D is liable to satisfy the competing needs of technologism, humanism, and environmentalism, and thereby to create a full-spectrum political coalition in support of fusion energy, the development path of fusion technology is likely to be constrained by the energy sector transformation, because fusion energy must enter the market before the mass electricity storage problem is resolved, confirming that the time of fusion's regulation is of the essence. To reach 1% of electricity production by 2070, we would only need 125 fusion power plants built in parallel with a thermal output similar to fission power plants, which would cost almost $13,000 billion. Under these circumstances, attracting private sector financing will be hard without government involvement, and therefore governments as investors of first resort must be able to provide patient funding and continue leading the fusion endeavor. If fusion machines will be fueled by deuterium tritium, then to switch them on, tritium must be available, which is likely to be produced in fission reactors, since today this is the only proven technology and the most economical way to produce tritium. Yet we know that tritium does not exist as a natural resource. We know that within a few decades, tritium will no longer be produced commercially and that it cannot be inventoried long-term. The tritium window, as it was once defined by Rutherford, is expected to remain open until around 2050, while defense stockpiles of tritium are unlikely ever to be shared. The other way would be to develop international lithium-6 enrichment capabilities for significant tritium production, which would be very expensive, take a long time, and require control by the international community to ensure their use for peaceful purposes. Assuming that facility design and construction take some years, the design of the process equipment must be available by the mid-2020s, the latest. Therefore, a global collaboration imperative emerges to put fusion R&D into the tritium window and develop controlled lithium-6 enrichment capabilities already in this decade of action. But if tritium production for fusion machines falls under nuclear regulation, it is reasonable to believe that tritium production in self-sufficient fusion power plants will also fall under nuclear regulation, albeit its requirements will be different from the ones applicable to fission reactors due to the different hazards and risks involved. Contrary to what one may think, application of nuclear regulation to fusion technology is not a curse. While application of nuclear regulation in straitjacket mode would certainly imply additional complexity and cost, nuclear regulation, emphasizing international collaboration and peaceful uses, is to ensure that state-of-art anticipatory systems are developed for fusion's life-critical systems to prevent accidents and to make fusion technology safer. In this respect, nuclear regulation is meant to guarantee that management decisions in designing and constructing fusion power plants may not simply govern by financial considerations. To this end, by reducing the cost of key components by innovation will have the most effect in making the fusion competitive, economies of scale can only be achieved if a global program for fusion deployment exists, which may be the only way to mitigate capacity constraints of individual nation-states and to ensure that a single set of rules and requirements will apply to the fusion technology everywhere in the world. In the fusion paradigm, fusion must reach the level of mass production, which will require global standardization of fusion technologies, and a change in the unit of assessment that links today regulatory attention to individual fission nuclear installations and nation states. The conditions for success of such legal innovation, which was inconceivable for fission technology's inherent safety, and the absence of national solutions and legacy items seems to warrant. Therefore, it is suggested that international nuclear regulation be redesigned for fusion with a clean slate, without the accumulated complexity of existing arrangements, but using the experience gained in their decades of development. Yet, rapid deployment of fusion technology worldwide will only be possible if this legal innovation occurs at the level of the international community. Because of its megalithic size, global deployment of fusion technology could only be successful if executed in co-development of the global north and the global south, as an exchange of sharing fusion technology for the continuous supply of critical raw materials and investment. In turn, availability of critical raw materials will inform early design choices and warrant political support from OPEC countries. Therefore, regulation should primarily concern today the creation of an international governance network that could flexibly regulate fusion in view of its rapid development and deployment worldwide. To this end, fusion must be reconceptualized as a product of international development to serve the benefits of all humankind, using enhanced international collaboration and the means of international law. A new market where competition is irrelevant could be created for new customer segments to serve new demands following a focused differentiation strategy based on sovereign equality. In this respect, international regulation of fusion as a governance network may become the blue ocean strategy of fusion energy, which can help gradually reduce fusion power plants' deployment costs. Based on what I just said, imagine a world that fusion international regulation unites, in which fusion electricity, the engine of new world's constant economic development, can only be produced by fusion power plants operated by not-for-profit international organizations that would be regulated by other international organizations. Such a system of international organization would be established by nation states to develop, deploy, exploit, and regulate fusion technology and international lithium-6 enrichment capabilities for peaceful purposes. They would be expert organizations that master fusion technology according to the highest standards of nuclear safety, and their responsibility under international law could effectively replace the global nuclear liability patchwork for fusion energy, maintaining legal channeling of liability for fusion damage. Nation states whose sovereignty would remain intact would be obliged to take over the produced electricity at production cost as part of their international obligations. International organizations could not go bankrupt due to their income-determined budgets, and because nation states would stand behind them, hence even private investors could find attractive to finance fusion technologies globally. Of course, my vision for fusion energy is just a utopic system, but if we do not break the cycle we learned with the development of fission technology, fusion technology is designed to step on the road of fission technology, whose regulation remains fragmented and whose global deployment is behind any projection still after 70 years of existence. The question to be asked is therefore if humankind really wants fusion energy to happen. If so, because of any further delays in fusion development places fusion technology at risk by allowing the unique and effectively irreplaceable tritium resource to decay to levels which may be insufficient to complete fusion technology development, there is no room for national solutions, but for a concerted international solution. Therefore, like-minded fusionistas, such as the members of INLA Working Group 8 on Fusion, or FELEX, the International Group of Legal Experts on Fusion Energy, need to step up and share their vision and present their arguments with ethical appeal again and again. The uncertainties of fusion R&D demand that we let go the illusion of knowing everything and embrace both friendly and harsh realities along the way. However, our actions will not be enough unless we have a global platform built on tri-sector partnership with broader audience outside and in addition to the existing fusion specialist channels to reach the layman to exchange about what and why we can embed fusion technology in tomorrow's society. To resolve global issues similar to the acceleration of fusion R&D, Riscard proposed creation of a new type of public space through global issues networks, allowing for distributed intelligence across borders and sectors. As he suggested, the current international setup for solving inherently global issues was essentially not up to the task. In his view, the horizontal legitimacy of the global issues networks was designed to pressure the traditional vertical legitimacy systems of nation states into performing better on urgent global issues. Performing better means acting faster and with more of a long-term global citizenship perspective, which is exactly what fusion R&D needs in this decade of action. Therefore, today I reiterate the need for a World Fusion Forum, a boundaryless global organization in which we bring together the most diverse global audience without any form of discrimination, so that fusion energy can fulfill its social purpose. That is, to co-create a better world powered by fusion energy for all. Members of the World Fusion Forum should be deeply concerned and knowledgeable about fusion energy and should think and act as a global citizen. Its architecture should be open without any form of hierarchy, because people must be able to chime in and be heard when they have something to contribute. The World Fusion Forum, as a kind of governance tool, would be permanent. Its initially limited membership would increase from phase to phase, and it would keep evolving over its lifetime, accompanying global fusion R&D efforts. The constitutional phase would start from a launching event, which would enlist individuals from national governments from the developed and developing countries, international civil society organizations, and fusion industry. In addition, there should be 3 facilitators: an international organization such as the IAEA, one representative selected from the civil society membership such as INLA, and one representative selected from the business membership. Together, they would be in charge of selecting and roping in the first members, convening early events, raising financing, organizing the knowledge base, and adopting a code of conduct. As facilitators, the 3-sector partnership would be at the heart of the World Fusion Forum during its existence. Moreover, the World Fusion Forum would create a potentially vast electronic town meeting with an entirely open architecture aimed at enlisting all interested parties in the forum's work to deliberative polling. The World Fusion Forum may also decide to set up an independent expert panel who would be outside the forum to preserve its scientific independence. As the World Fusion Forum would enter the next phase, it would increase its membership and engage in the production of requirements, norms, standards, or policy recommendations developed by rough consensus, which would be a work-in-progress concept, not a voting one. The forum would extrapolate a global vision for fusion energy and then work backwards to intermediate steps needed to realize that vision by a given deadline. Next, the forum would draw up a set of requirements, norms, or standards put forward through a launch event to set in motion the processes that will lead to the fulfillment of these intermediary steps. The World Fusion Forum would specify the requirements and norms according to which nation states should pass national legislation, which it could review before adoption and monitor during implementation. It would specify requirements and norms for businesses to follow a fusion R&D and in the fusion supply chain. It could come up with recommendations for action plans for international organizations in the field. In the implementation phase, reputational effect would come into play, while the World Fusion Forum would further increase its membership and turn into a rating vehicle, evaluating countries and other relevant actors on how well they comply with the requirements, follow the norms, standards, or recommendations, and rating the global progress with a view to the global vision for fusion energy. The forum could also become a best practice exchange system with its electronic town meetings. The World Fusion Forum, geared to rapid norm production and rapid activation of reputational effects, would complement the effects of the current international system. The World Fusion Forum, operating as a bottom-up global issues network, would pave the way for a G7, G20 initiative as top-down resolution of the issues related to the acceleration of fusion R&D. To this end, building on the proposal of Karayannis et al., a global commission to accelerate fusion energy has been advocated for, with a view to the possible launch of a global Fusion for Peace program, a 21st century fusion equivalent of the US Atoms for Peace program, the scope and size of which the rapid and economic development and deployment of fusion technology will require. Through the political energy and urgency that the World Fusion Forum will generate, it will pressure the existing international system into responding at a much faster pace. Then it would naturally adopt an international treaty to create a system of international organizations that would exclusively develop and deploy fusion technology around the world and regulate its peaceful use. And indeed, there is hope that we are on the right path towards humanity-centered fusion technology development, because perhaps the IAEA's World Fusion Energy Group, recently announced by the IAEA Director General Grossi, could step-by-step transform into what a World Fusion Forum is intended to be. By bringing together all the stakeholders, this collaboration can enable that fusion technology is co-designed in the widest global collaboration for the benefit of all humankind. Thank you for your attention. Get in touch if you want to pay and draw attention to fusion energy. You can join us at the 3rd Fusion for Energy Roundtable that will take place in June next year in France and online to discuss how international regulation should be shaped for humanity-centered fusion technology development.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, and I'm going to give the floor to our 3rd speaker.
Yes, thank you, Oksana. I'm sorry, I was supposed to be introducing the panel, but zooming in was not so easy. So
no, yes, we had some technological issues and we started. So it's all good.
Yes,
It's all
yes. As you probably say, harasho. Libon. So then the question is, what do we do next? Karoli and John, I believe, and I thank them for their time and comments, presented the roadmap and a pathway.
Elias, we cannot see you. You don't have your
Yes.
camera on.
But you can see my slides and you can hear me, correct?
Yes. Well, I just
Don't
was.
interrupt me.
So if you
Just
want,
let me. How much time do I have, Oksana? And then I'll continue, please. How much time do I have?
well, I think you can do the full. I mean, whatever you prepared, and if some of the audience members.
Of course, no. What's the total time we have now because of all the changes? I'm confused a little bit. Let's do the schedule.
Yes, well, the meeting was supposed to be ending right now, but because we were 20 minutes, we started 20 minutes late. I think we can go 20 minutes longer. But if the audience,
we will not need.
I just wanted to say if the audience has any questions and they have to leave, so they can type them in Q&A or chat right now, and we can address them as we go. But
Fine. I will not be long. If you just let me conclude. I just have a few comments and share some questions that actually the panel generated in preparing for this discussion. As you see, the title of the panel, The Future of Developed Democracies in the Natural Environment, the Role of Public Interest Technologies. We focus primarily on fusion. And indeed, Karoli, in his presentation, I think also John earlier, referred to some of the work leading to and preceding these concepts and comments, including several publications I have with John and others. And the Global Commission idea is something we fervently believe might be a very instrumental, path-breaking innovation in policy and diplomacy even. But of course, time will show whether humans are up to it. This is related to the issue of tactical fragmentation versus strategic integration, which I think is critical. And it is what Karoli, I think, very nicely highlighted in his slides. So the issue is how do we better navigate the future? So here are some questions for this discussion and for consideration and reflection also from the audience, and of course, starting with the panelists. First question, I think that some of these questions have been in some ways addressed already, but I would like to have us take a direct approach to addressing them again. First of all, and this is in the context of open science versus proprietary technology, this is the background, because that really definitely will impact and shape the rate of progress and even the possibility of progress. So first question then is, what would it take to get a commercial fleet of fusion reactors by 2050? Would John like to take any stab at it, and then maybe Karoli?
Yes, I mean, so ARPA-E has modeled this in the United States, and it would take 2 or 3 major breakthroughs in science, in fusion science, in materials science, in terms of wall-facing materials, in terms of advanced fuels. So you're looking at either lithium or proton-boron 11 reaction, and that means that there need right now, to be billions of dollars being put into developing advanced fuels, and billions of dollars aren't being put into developing advanced fuels right now. They're being put into developing tokamak reactors, spherical tokamak reactors, known technology using deuterium and tritium. So you would have to see billions of dollars in money being pumped into the public sector, into public sector laboratories, or into public sector laboratories working in cooperation with the private sector through, for example, the Infuse program in the United States, which is where the scientists from the public sector and private sector get together in the same labs and share their results. That kind of stimulus is what is what is needed to get there by 2050, in my opinion.
Okay. Karoli, do you have any follow-up further comments on this? You did touch on it in your presentation, so but you're welcome.
For me, what you need is attention. And then if there is attention, then you will have investment as well. You also need human resources. So that's why I believe that the top-down and bottom-up approach needs to be combined. So the Global Commission is a top-down approach, and my World Fusion Forum idea is a bottom-up approach. What we can see today that people do not know about fusion. They do not know what it can bring for them. So I do believe that there is a communication exercise to be done as well, not just putting money on the table. You also need to convince the next generation, because fusion technology development is an intergeneration effort, and you will need to have the new generation who would like to embark into this. You will need to have a supply chain. You will have also a workforce that should be developing components for fusion power plants and then operate it later on. So I think we need to start with the attention, and then if you have that, everything will
Good. This is actually reminding us of the importance of the strategic integration theme that both of you, in a way, touched on, referred to. And so going to the next question, and that connects to the ongoing realities, the COP28. What, if any, do you expect coming out of this activity event, interaction regarding fusion? And what will be the significance, if any? John, and then Karoli.
Yeah, so we are hearing things coming out of COP28 already, but there's no new money. There's no big deal between the global north and south over developing fusion. The biggest project in the demo phase of fusion, which is the post-ITER phase, is the STEP program, the STEP reactor out of the United Kingdom. So until the global north sits down with organizations like OPEC and says, okay, how are we going to transition through fission, perhaps, because Saudi Arabia is looking very closely at fission. How are we going to transition towards fusion? Like Elias just said, I don't know when that COP's going to happen. It could be several COPs in the future, but I don't think it's going to happen out of this one.
Okay, this is a different variation of the predicted pollution concept I mentioned before in terms of COPs. Anyway, so should advanced fuels, in that sense, be open science? Would that help? Would it make a difference in this attention attracting and convergence and coordination issues that we're discussing? Top down and bottom up, by the way. John, and then actually Karoli, I apologize. I didn't let you speak. I apologize for
the 28th. So we are expecting John Kerry's announcement regarding how the US is willing to set up an international framework for international collaboration. I hope that this announcement will say that this international collaboration needs to be modular and inclusive, so it can start with a smaller group of
there's convergence. There's likely to be a convergence of sorts.
I mean, we will see, but my wish would be that it is a modular and inclusive collaborative framework, meaning that we start with a small number of countries, most probably ITER members, even bilateral relationships, but it should be open to anyone who is willing to contribute.
Okay. So, keying on the word open, I'm repeating that question again. I'm sorry for the process confusion here, but should advanced fuels be open science? And would that somehow facilitate further progress in the context we're looking at? Karoli, you want to tackle this first, and then we'll go to John?
I think before we answer this question, it's there should be an agreement on how intellectual property should be managed. So we need to consider that fusion R&D has a lot of sunk cost that has been paid by the governments or by taxpayers. So there should be a question how we want to manage fusion technology development in the future when commercial entities will appear and would like to have exclusive IP rights on technology, which also includes the fuel, because once you move to advanced fuels, so from tritium, deuterium, tritium, you move to advanced fuels. It also comes with higher level of physics requirements, which means that the technology is more complex. So I think the two things are somehow connected. And if we socialized the risks, I believe that we should socialize also the rewards. So I would urge that there is an international framework discussed in this respect.
Absolutely. And this is indeed the issue with intellectual property rights, public interest technologies, considerations, and the implications, as you mentioned, socializing both risks and rewards. John, any comments on the open science?
Yes. So I think
can I just say one thing? So I think we have about 8 minutes left, and if the audience has any if any members of the audience have any questions, please type them in Q&A or chat, so that we can address them.
Thank you. Thank you, Oksana. I don't see any questions typed, but please feel free to do so if you wish. I do think that this discussion is helpful anyway. John, please go ahead.
Yes, so there's a couple of different models here. One is, I mean, I'm going to have to say this, the Chinese model, which is essentially cloning. So the technology, if developed by a Western private sector company for an advanced fuel, would almost inevitably be cloned by China, which would securitize it, nationalize it in the process. There are midway models towards that. So India, for example, India's attitude towards generic medicines is very much that generic medicines that save the lives of tens of millions of children should be very cheap. And if the West is not willing to do a deal with the Indian government to produce them very cheaply, then it will, again, essentially nationalize them in a democratic way. And so there are different ways of getting there that, if an advanced fuel is in fact viable, will be got there by the global South. As a result, it is, from a purely pragmatic basis, in the global North and West's interest to do a deal so that open science is promoted as part of a hybrid approach using the public and the private sector, rather than attempting to double down on protecting IP here.
So the point here and the lesson to observe, at least if not learn, is that there is prior experience, including with IPR in the context of solutions for healthcare and public healthcare, especially. We saw that with the COVID virus vaccines development and the issues with India, South Africa, and other countries. The point here, I think, is whether we could have a more enlightened approach rather than a situation where we actually double down on fragmentation. So in this context, about international collaboration, is this really necessary? Does it work? Karoli too talked about a modular approach, starting with smaller groups, bilateral and small group, and hopefully growing. Is there a role for UN or other bodies to facilitate this kind of effort and accelerate it in an instrumental fashion, or is this just going to be a sort of a bystander observer? The international bodies and individual small group initiatives, that is, would really have to make the difference. Karoli, you want to tackle this first, and then John?
I mean, to answer your specific question, in my view, first, the ITER members need to recognize that there is a collaboration imperative, so that they need to extend fusion R&D efforts to a broader audience. And then I think both John and I were talking about that most probably this international collaboration needs to be horizontally and vertically extended. We need the Global South, and the Global South needs to. So it should not be about technology transfer that usually we see in the climate conference discussions or in the fission technology discussions. It should be co-development of technology so that the Global South feels involved in the development, in the value chain of the technology itself. But it needs to start from the realization by the ITER members or some of them that steps needs to be done. I don't think that this will be led by an international organization. There must be first the nation states, most probably one of the ITER members who says that, okay, this makes sense. I have a longer term vision and I have a concept how this should be developed, and then they will start this process.
Okay, John, any comments? And I do encourage people, if they have any questions, to type them in, please. See any at this point. The last 2 points, international collaboration and innovation, the Global South approach is an example of innovation in policy making, global scale, actually. So in addition to technological innovations, any other innovations beyond those you've already sort of referred to, John, that you would envision?
So we have, I'm sorry, we have a comment from the audience that they have some questions. So we need to, so if I see.
So can we have the questions, please? I don't see them and I don't hear them. Sorry.
Yes, Guillermo, you cannot unmute, you have to type them. If you can hear me, the
Do
audience.
they see the chat? Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the chat, but you have to type them in the chat. Okay.
They say they don't have a computer. I don't, I'm sorry, but I don't know how to, yeah.
Yes, there is, unfortunately, there is no way to unmute and we have only 2 minutes left. So please type your, I mean, if you're using your phone or whatever.
May I suggest to use the remaining time to address a couple more points. And if there are questions and people really care about having a response, you know, they have my email to begin with to avoid any confusion, and they can send them my way. I'll be happy to discuss them and respond to them, as well as the other panel members, if that's okay.
Yes, where is your email, Elias? Is it on this share screen? I cannot see.
Yeah, the email is here. Let me, the concluding slide.
Yes, and everybody can take a screenshot who wants to. Okay, yes. So here is the email.
Yeah, and I put it in the chat too. That I don't know if they see it though. Probably don't.
Okay, wonderful. Yes,
so,
because we have 1 minute left, so
okay. All right, so let me ask 30 seconds, John, and then Karoli. 30 seconds. What is your wish list here, your vision and your dream about how this could actually happen, rather than just remain something for decades that could be an unrealized opportunity? John, you're muted.
Okay, so the main thing is the Global Commission to Accelerate Fusion Energy. It's reasonably certain now that we're going to break 1.5. We're likely to break 2 by the end of the century. If we ignore the consensus-based approach of the IPCC, then we're looking at 3 to 4 degrees C global warming, which is catastrophic and maybe incompatible with human civilization.
Karoli, John,
so we need fusion energy.
Go ahead, Karoli.
I mean, I do hope that we can accelerate fusion technology development. I don't believe that it is going to be 10 years, that by the time we will have electricity on the grid. I think we need to be more cautious what kind of message we are giving to the public, because public support and also political support is very fragile.
Okay, let me thank you both and conclude with this comment, which is that indeed temperature is rising. We need to be truly path-breaking, think beyond the box, as I said, and truly have strategic integration. And that means fusion needs to be fully leveraged, among other options, including what I call, and I have written about on my the website of the Journal of the Knowledge Economy, one of the journals I added that I call net negative. Net zero is not enough anymore. And given that fusion will take some time, geoengineering and other approaches to drive a net negative reduction of carbon and greenhouse in the atmosphere is a must. Thank you, Oksana, and I hope we didn't run over too much. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining the session. We apologize for the technological issues. You can reach me. Yes, there is another email in chat. Carola's email. So we are going to end this session, and I thank all the panelists for a wonderful presentation. Bye-bye.